even though most of us who have or who still struggle with problematic porn consumption or even porn addiction, even though most of us realize that porn is an escape from our life, from our suffering. The clinical term would be experiential avoidance. Even though most of us understand that this is the case, we still somehow often, and I definitely ended up in the situation where I thought, okay, porn is the main problem in my life. Watching porn is the worst thing that I can do, the worst thing that's happening to me or that I'm engaging with. And then as soon as I stop watching porn, everything will be fine. I will feel good about myself, confident. I will reap all the benefits of not watching porn, maybe not even masturbating or having an orgasm. And then that's a good story one can tell or believe in. But in this view that porn is the problem, I think it misses the whole dynamic of what's actually going on. Because if we really understand and really look at what's causing us to watch porn, the suffering that we experience, the pain, the life we're living that we're not aligned with, not comfortable with, not enjoying, not appreciating, then we can understand that porn is actually the solution. Not a good solution, not a healthy or sustainable solution, but a solution that at some point we picked up in order to feel relieved, to feel happy, to feel at ease. Even though with porn that's only for a few moments in time. Because when we stop and when we put the screen away, then we may realize or see where we are. And then that's often not very pleasurable or enjoyable. And then with this understanding, with seeing the function of porn, which is to be happy again or to be free of suffering, then if we just focus on quitting porn, on not watching porn anymore, we're actually not getting rid of the problem that we have, but we're getting rid of our solution to our problem or to our problems. And I think this is why people who try to quit porn, and why I tried to quit porn and wasn't successful with it in the past, is because then, okay, you start watching porn, which is a good thing. It's definitely healthy or has certain benefits, but then you're still just thrown back into your suffering, into your life without avoiding it. And because that's so intense or can be so miserable, that then eventually you just go back to porn because you don't know any other way to relieve your suffering. Maybe there are other ways, like food addiction, drug addiction, gambling, which is then also a thing that can happen, that you then just switch your addiction. You stop watching porn, but then you eat more food, or then you take more drugs, and then you come back to porn, and yeah. And in this dynamic, or with this focus, or being mindful of this deeper function of porn, we could actually then also see that the suffering we experience is also there because there's even something deeper, which may be the trauma that we carry with us. For me, it was this belief that I'm not good enough, which I think is true for a lot of men, or relatable to a lot of men who also feel that or think that, even though that's sometimes unconscious thought. But for me, this was like the deepest wound in myself, which then created a lot of suffering, which then I needed to escape from. Because when you act out of this belief that you're not good enough, you sabotage your relationships, you can't enjoy the work you're doing. Maybe you don't do the work you want to do because you think you're not good enough. You're afraid that it won't be good. If you really commit what you value, what you would actually love to do, but then not doing it also creates suffering because you're not being aligned or true to yourself. And then this also gets forgotten or doesn't get the attention it needs or deserves when we only focus on removing porn from our lives. It can be a stepstone to remove porn, to face our suffering, and then also face our trauma, and then to heal and transform it. Yeah, but we can get so lost in, oh, I should quit, oh, I didn't quit, and this whole dynamic, which also leads me to this vicious circle of suffering and watching porn that I want to describe to you. You could maybe relate to, which is that something creates suffering and then life is unpleasant, which then leads to watching porn, which then leads to shame and thinking, oh, I shouldn't have done that, or I should quit, this is not good, why did I do this again? Which kind of erodes your confidence and can also lead to being very hard on yourself or on ourselves, no pun intended, which then leads to thinking, oh, I need to quit. And then you may be successful at quitting for a few days or a few weeks, maybe a few months even. But then, because there's no longer this relief that you get, and then because there's still trauma that creates suffering, eventually there's more and more tension, and then eventually you probably relapse, especially if you also ban masturbation from your life or sex in general, which can happen because people have this overreaction to quitting porn or to watching porn, to be completely abstinent. But then eventually you relapse, and then you feel even worse, or you feel even more shame, which leads to even more suffering, and then this whole circle just continues and it just goes on and on. So in this way, I think it is good to reduce watching porn and to stop watching porn, but with the caveat or with the intention then to actually stay with the suffering, and then to actually do the necessary shadow work or going to therapy, to actually understanding the dynamics that cause you to feel suffering in your life, or that cause you to live a life that you don't enjoy, which becomes possible if you stay with your suffering and if you inquire into it, maybe even with a compassionate inquiry, which just so happens to be the therapeutic method of Gabo Mate. But there are also other therapeutic methods that are very effective or very helpful. And then instead of starting this vicious circle again of suffering and then avoiding it by feeling the suffering and staying with it, inquiring into it, maybe you can start to understand why it's there, why you feel like you're not good enough, to take this as an example. Feeling like the world is dangerous or you can't trust people, all of those things can also be certain types of trauma, but I will focus on not being good enough in this video. You maybe can then understand, by staying with the suffering and inquiring into the suffering, why you made this conclusion, or why you at some point had to make this interpretation of reality that you're not good enough. Which in my case, and probably in a lot of other cases, is because our parents and the people we are dependent on as children or as teenagers even, not because they were entirely responsible, but because they often may have treated us in a way that wasn't caring, that was harsh, that was unloving, violent, combined maybe with emotional violence, emotional abuse, verbal abuse, or even with physical violence and abuse, which then, as a child, gives us the impression that, oh, maybe they all treat me in this way because I am not worthy of being treated with love. Maybe if I would have been in a better position, have more status, more money, more intelligence, better looks, then maybe people would treat me in a way that would be more loving, more accepting. Which then gets internalized and becomes part of our identity, and then leads to all the suffering and maybe watching porn or other addictions. But then if we understand this, that maybe also the people who treated us in this way, maybe they didn't know any better. Maybe they were also suffering, and maybe we are actually lovable, and it doesn't have anything to do with how people treated us. And that we weren't in a position to handle this because we were very vulnerable as children, and we didn't have the means to maybe end these relationships because we are dependent on our parents and other caregivers, or not caregivers, not caring givers. Then we can have more compassion and just see that, oh well, I was in a bad situation. Maybe these people were in horrible situations because they also had horrible experiences in their past. But this is no longer true in this moment or in the present. And I no longer need to believe all these things that I started to believe in the past, who were based on real information, but who got twisted into slightly less real or only partly true conclusions, like I'm not good enough. Which then leads to feeling less suffering or less shame, if we can slowly understand that we are actually good enough, and that we can take care of ourselves, and we can do things without being afraid all the time, or we can do things out of loving ourselves and not hating ourselves. Which leads to kind of a new baseline and a life where we're not constantly in suffering, or we create less suffering. Because maybe we're in a relationship and someone doesn't text back, we don't think, oh, they don't like us anymore. Maybe we just think, oh well, maybe they didn't have time to text back, and that's okay. Or we do something and we fail by following our passion, and then instead of thinking, oh, I'm so bad and I can never do this, and this is another confirmation of that I'm not worthy and all this stuff, we can actually see, oh well, I tried and I didn't make it, maybe then I try again, because by this trial and error, by fucking around and finding out, I will learn and get better. And maybe I'm a beginner in a certain area, and that's fine. Don't need to be ashamed of it, or I'm not less worthy or less of a person or less lovable if I can't do something in a way that's perfect. Perfectionism is also a symptom of all this stuff, that everything needs to be perfect so that we can be good enough. Yeah, but then there's eventually less of a need to escape or to avoid our life, because we actually start to enjoy our life. And then in this way there's less of a Leidensdruck is the German word. The translation would be there's less of a tension of suffering, or less tension because of suffering. And then maybe we can just regulate ourselves by practicing mindfulness, or going on a walk, or painting, or something that's more sustainable, something that helps us regulate ourselves without completely depleting us and robbing us our time like watching porn can do. Then we can start regulating ourselves without developing an addiction. Maybe we can regulate ourselves by talking to other people instead of being alone in our room with a screen. And then it can still happen that we maybe relapse or watch porn again. But even then we can be more compassionate and see, oh well, whoops, I did it again, and it's okay, it's not the end of the world if we fuck up or if we do something we didn't want to do. Then we can just see, oh, I didn't have the capacity to regulate myself in another way, or it was too much for me. But okay, then I will just see and not do it again. Instead of it being this whole dramatic thing of I need to quit, and if I don't quit, it's the worst that can happen to me, and it being so dangerous and dramatic. And if we watch porn and are less ashamed of it afterwards, then we also have less tension to then quit and then relapse and then stay in the cycle, in the circle. And then the last thing I want to talk about is how we can then actually meet our own sexuality, our own arousal, without escaping, without watching porn, but in a way that's healthy, that's integrated, that's not suppression and not abuse, but maybe just becoming aware of being aroused, of being attracted to someone, of feeling attraction, of being sexual in some form, as some part of ourselves. Which is also then made possible or can be practiced through mindfulness. That instead of using porn to escape and using sexuality to escape, because you can also use masturbation to escape even without porn, and then instead of completely suppressing it, oh, I'm not allowed to masturbate, even that's the devil and that's evil and I should be completely celibate, we can then just be aware of, oh, I feel aroused. I don't need to immediately act on it. I don't need to suppress it and push it away. I can just be with it, observe it, maybe appreciate it. And then maybe you can still express it by yourself or in a relationship, but without this neediness, without this extreme urgency that can be there if you're addicted to porn or sex. And then it becomes maybe something beautiful that's met with openness and authenticity and kindness. And then it's kind of balanced. It's something that's a conscious process and not something that's so compulsive anymore. So I think if we can truly and deeply heal ourselves through therapy, through meditation, maybe even through practicing Zen or other types of spiritual practices or religion, if that's something that speaks to you, doesn't need to be. I think then we can change our lifestyle in a way, or our being, be more in contact with our being, which all leads to less suffering, less tension, and lesser need to escape and avoid the life that we're living.